She always remembered the man who appeared with every sunset. She always thought about how he didn't look like the sunset, since his face was light and his hair was cold as ice. Looking at him from the back, he seemed completely transparent to her. The heroine accurately remembered his cold, aloof gaze, which he gave her one evening when they met. She was always afraid that he was about to disappear in front of her forever. His figure always stood with a book in his hand, but he seemed to her a man of the wrong time. Their first meeting took place in the library 2 years ago. It was there that she encountered a mysterious stranger in the rays of the setting sun. He stood near the window and was distracted by the stranger only for a moment, and it was this meeting that she could not forget until now. Suddenly, from the memories, someone called her by the name of Kate. It was her husband, Ron, who was waiting for her in the living room. She apologized to him for dozing off a little, but the man was worried that the girl had a nightmare again. With a smile, Kate assured me that she was fine. She proceeded to tie the tie on the shirt of the man who was about to go about his business. He asked his wife if everything was fine with her, although her answer did not change. Despite such answers, the girl really looked slightly crumpled and constrained. The blonde warned that he would then leave her alone. Putting on his jacket, the guy left the house, and Kate saw him off with a smile, wishing him a good trip. But as soon as his figure disappeared behind the door, the smile disappeared from the girl's face. She immediately felt bad, and each time she did not understand why, Kate collapsed wearily on the bed to get her thoughts in order. She was really sick just looking at her husband. Ron Blank was her husband in the present tense, and a few years ago, the girl agreed to this proposal. To her, he had once been thoughtful and handsome, and she still couldn't understand why he had married her. The blonde was an assistant to a famous dressmaker. One day, Kate accidentally received a letter that came to their house while Ron was away. It was a letter from her sister Rosalind, who was romantically involved with him. She realized that her husband actually loved her sister. As she read the letter over and over again, she realized that Ron had never even dared to say such a thing to her, his wife. By marrying him, she hoped that she would be loved. Ron did seem sweet and kind to her. However, when Kate saw this letter, she realized that once again life had diverted attention from her, as it had always been. Even her father has loved Rosalind more than Kate since childhood. The man never paid much attention to his youngest daughter, and the reason for this was really there. After the birth of Kate, her mother became very ill due to the weakening of the body. Holding his newborn daughter in his arms, the man saw her as the cause of death of his beloved woman. Kate's mother really died immediately after her birth. Standing by the bed, Rosalind was still too young to understand what had happened to her mother, but the man was holding the second child and crying. Since then, her father has constantly compared her with his eldest daughter, called Kate a disgrace to the family, and at the slightest failure ordered her to get out of the house. And one day, living like this, day after day, the heroine met him. A blonde-haired, mysterious stranger from the library. He only turned his gaze to her for a moment, as he noticed the close attention on himself. In fact, the girl looked so hard at the hair, which was really an unusual color. The only comparison that came to mind was that they were like snow, and the girl continued to look at him, despite the fact that it was very indecent. Suddenly, she felt as if she had been electrocuted, and she woke up from a beautiful delusion. Her book, which she took from the shelf for reading, accidentally fell from surprise. Reaching for it, she began to speculate in panic about how she had gone mad to stare at a stranger so intently. However, what she saw in the next moment made her stop. Kate looked up in the direction of the young man she had met a few moments ago. Their hands touched each other as they both rushed to pick up the fallen book at the same time. From surprise, both characters froze in this beautiful moment, keeping eye contact with each other. The stranger gallantly handed the girl a book, to which she could only say thank you. He went back to read his book, but Kate didn't understand why it was so difficult to say anything else to him. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest with excitement. She hurried to turn away and go to another reading room, as she had planned earlier. Trying to hide from her own awkwardness, which arose from meeting this guy, the girl ran away as fast as she could. Kay thought that in her entire life she had never experienced such emotions, because this is how falling in love felt. After that, she went to the library for 6 months to meet him again. Kate took the book and went straight to the room where the stranger sat at his window as usual. He never got distracted from the text of the same book. No matter how many times Kate came to that place, she never even looked into his eyes. The strange thing was that his expression almost never changed, so it seemed to the girl that he was always frowning. Often, being in the library instead of reading, the girl imagined how beautiful the voice of her admirer could be. But one day, 6 months later, the stranger did not come to the library, although he used to come every day. As she walked into the room, she thought she wouldn't see him for the first time in a long time. He was gone for several days, and the heroine had already begun to worry when suddenly she heard a story, because one of the visitors recognized an acquaintance in the signs told by the girl. That evening, that strange guy told a horrifying story. She surprised the girl so much that she could not believe in her. He said that the stranger with white hair had died. A few days later, there was a strong, cloudy evening, which was distinguished by rain. It was the funeral of Edwin Arthur Wand. Kate learned his name at the funeral, as well as that he was a prince and the son of a king. On the way to the palace, an accident occurred, and the carriage overturned. The funeral that day was too meager for a prince and a man of his stature. Kate could not believe what was happening, and although she had never spoken to him, she already felt an inexplicable kinship of their souls. Full of grief, she stood for a long time near his coffin. And he was too beautiful to die so early. The girl, heartbroken endlessly, wondered if he knew she had been watching him. She remembered how when she looked at him, her heart was always ready to jump out of her chest. Kate cried endlessly over his body, not believing what was happening and thinking that the guy had just fallen asleep. It was the 5th of October, 263. It was on this day that Kate's first love left this world. After Edwin's death, the girl accepted the offer that she was going to refuse initially. Ron promised the girl that they would be able to sow a wonderful life. He proposed to get the support of her father, who was a marquis, and the girl only wanted to leave her disgusting home as soon as possible. It was a loveless marriage, but she thought that if they were just nice to each other, it might not be so bad. However, all that the girl received was a betrayal, since after a while her husband began to disdain Kate. Each time the quarrels were very difficult and painful for her, and locking herself in the room, she remembered her first love with nostalgia. Falling asleep, she repeated his name in half-delirium. The girl regretted that she had not spoken to him in the library when he was alive. After all, if this had happened, perhaps everything would have been different. In these sorrowful thoughts, Kate fell asleep, hoping for a different life. She only dreamed of seeing him again to change everything, but suddenly a loud female voice called her by name. When the girl woke up, she noticed that she was sleeping in different clothes. In front of her stood Rosalind, who was outraged by her sister's behavior. Kate expected to see her sister, as she remembered falling asleep at home. In her mind, the girl thought about the reason why Rosalind was near her. However, after a couple of seconds, the heroine realized that she was not at home. From the interior, she realized that it was a house that was given to her for her 16th birthday. Suddenly, she was roughly grabbed by her older sister. The girl pulled Kate out of bed and explained that their father was looking for her. All Rosalind heard was that Kate's marriage was being discussed, as apparently someone had decided to marry her. The heroine still did not understand much of what was happening, because a couple of minutes ago, she calmly fell asleep at home. Without thinking, the brown-haired woman bluntly admitted that she had been married 2 years ago, to which Rosalie reacted very nervously. The sister pointed out that the girl was only 18 years old, and she could not have married 2 years ago. It had been some time since Kate had been in her room. Entering the main hall, the eldest of the daughters reported that she had found the youngest. Next to her father sat Ron, who at the sight of Kate rose from his seat to greet the girl. The heroine immediately recognized him and could not believe her eyes, because he was younger than his real years. The marquis introduced the guest, who asked the girl to come out into the hall, but Kate did not understand anything. The blonde gallantly announced that he was glad to meet the girl, since it was their first meeting. The girl, not forgetting about her manners, also hurried to introduce herself. Sitting down, the heroine really noted that the whole situation was similar to the events of 2 years ago. She thought it wasn't like a dream, but then it felt like she'd gone back in time. If this was true, then the girl could know what words Ron would say at any given moment. It was at this moment that the man expressed a desire to get to know his youngest daughter at home better. The girl realized in horror that Ron had said the same words earlier. The guy bent over the hand of his chosen one and kissed her. After that, Ron announced that he intended to marry her. Kate was horrified to realize that his lines were identical to the past, but it was too realistic for a dream. She remembered a letter she had found on Ron's possession confirming his infidelities, and the way he, already being a husband, was absolutely indifferent to her. The girl painfully remembered his cruel smirks, which he gave her when she tried to find out the reason for their quarrels every time. The girl bitterly decided that she would not allow this to happen again. She removed her hand from the groom's palm and responded with an unexpected refusal. Kate honestly admitted that she did not want to marry Ron. The guy clearly did not expect such a development of events. This situation infuriated Rosalind and her father, so they immediately accused her of being rude. However, Ron hastened to assure her that everything was fine, because he had not even thought of forcing himself on her. The girl was really sorry that everything happened this way, because she did not want to upset anyone. In her mind, the heroine began to think about the true reason for her return. She had to fix her relationship with Ron and prevent infidelity or bring Arthur back to life. Abruptly realizing that the second option was correct, Kate opened her eyes wide. Looking at the clock and calendar, the girl realized that Edwin was still alive. The clock showed that there were still a couple of days before the prince's death. Kate immediately notified her father that she was going to leave them, as she needed to go on business urgently. Ignoring her father's screams, the girl ran out of the hall. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Edwin was still in the library, so that was where the girl ran as fast as she could. She did not know why she really returned to the past, but the heroine decided to change the fate of her lover at all costs. She pushed the door of the room in the library where the guy usually was. Looking inside, Kate gasped in surprise because Edwin was standing near his window, as before. His hair was as light as snow then, and in his hands he was still holding the same red-bound book. Forgetting about her fear, the girl decided to talk to him. Hearing the name called, Edwin looked up at the girl who was standing at the threshold. The stranger quickly approached him. She didn't control her mind and actions, so her hand reached out to the guy by itself. She recalled the last memorable shot when she said goodbye to him during the funeral, and his face was deadly without emotion. However, now, when she touched his face, she felt the warmth of his skin and was glad of it. Tears involuntarily poured from her eyes because she was convinced that her beloved was alive as before. However, the man pushed her hand away, not understanding the stranger's actions. Angry at the situation, he bypassed the girl and intended to leave the hall. Kate was taken aback, but immediately asked Edwin to stop. She grabbed the man by the sleeve and tried to convince him that they needed to talk. Turning to the impudent lady, Edwin asked if they had known each other before. Fearing that the girl might wrinkle her clothes, the prince asked to let go of his clothes, so Kate was immediately embarrassed by her behavior. However, looking at his back, the heroine did not give up in her attempts. She asked to listen to her because she had something to tell. The girl thought to herself that of course she expected to see something like this. However, she remembered his cold gaze, full of disgust, which he had bestowed on her a couple of minutes ago. The girl was not ready for the fact that the guy would be so cold, although such a reaction was quite natural as she began to stroke his face and also cry. However, the girl needed to make sure that her lover was alive. Unable to stop Edwin today and talk to him, she looked at the beautiful sunset, trying to come up with a new plan. Kate had indeed returned to the past and could now save Edwin. The day passed and she was in her house. It was the 3rd of October, and even after spending the night, she did not go back to the future. Lying on the bed, the girl thought that she had returned to the moment in which Edwin had not yet died. She was willing to endure even his cold, so she was eager to go back to the library right away so as not to waste a second. The guy was sitting on the windowsill again, as always. In order for Edwin to pay attention to her, the girl covered the text of the book with her own hands. Although it was rude and made the guy's expression look slightly annoyed, it was a necessary measure. Kate immediately apologized for her rudeness, but clarified that she thought the guy wouldn't listen to her. Edwin closed his book and said that the girl's behavior was very strange because yesterday she cried, and today she began to bother him again. Getting up from his seat, he rushed out of the hall again, informing the girl that he was not interested in her words. Despite the cold, she stretched out her hands to him. Going around the guy and standing in front of him, she stopped him, explaining that the conversation was really important. Calling Kate a crybaby lady, Edwin clarified why he had to listen to her. The girl immediately told him not to get into the carriage that would go to the royal palace. This information shocked Arthur, who did not expect that it would be about it. However, Kate continued further and warned that the guy could otherwise die. Silently, she prayed to heaven that he would listen and not leave, but Edwin was no less shocked. Looking into his eyes, she kept waiting for his decision, hoping for faith in her words. However, the blonde man confirmed without fear the fact that all people will die someday. In his opinion, this could happen at any time because everyone will meet their end someday. The heroine did not understand how he could say such a thing when he was warned of death. The guy was already losing patience, so he didn't want to wait any longer for anything else. He decided to ask the girl something as well. He wondered how the stranger had learned about the prince's plans to go to the palace. Kate couldn't explain it rationally, so she hesitated. While she was trying to formulate a thought, the guy had already asked not to answer the question. The blonde man began to walk towards the exit without explaining anything. Passing by a new acquaintance, he expressed the hope that the girl would stop thinking about him. He was not so trusting as to succumb so easily to the requests of the first woman he met. But she did not want to give up because she was given the only chance, so the heroine grabbed the guy by the edge of the cuff. The girl tried to stop the prince in an attempt to explain the situation. She had no choice but to tell the whole truth that she had gone back in time a few days before Edwin's death. She said that after his death, the girl was very sorry for him. Therefore, since she had gone back in time, she thought that saving him would be the right thing to do. The words were heard even more delirious than before for the prince. Kate admitted that the guy has the right not to believe her, as he most likely thought that she was lying. However, looking straight into his eyes, the girl swore that she was telling the truth. She said that on the way to the palace, his carriage would overturn, and the prince would die. After a long, tense pause, the guy exhaled. Edwin looked at the girl with a tired look and admitted that she was telling the truth. These words gave Kate hope, so with a happy smile she thanked the gentleman for believing her, but he did not say that. The girl was confused again because of his harshness and coldness. The guy continued to speculate on this theory and imagined that the girl felt sorry for the young man who died, so returning to the past, she decided to save him. All this information did not form a logical chain in his head. Edwin asked directly what benefit the girl expected in return for such help. After all, the girl revealed such information without thinking about what would seem abnormal. The blonde man tried to understand if it was really just a matter of simple pity. Kate was very confused by such pressure and the number of questions, and could not formulate her thoughts. Folding her hands in front of her, she tried to involuntarily defend herself from the interlocutor. However, her gaze reflected only his silhouette, for the sake of which she was ready to go back in time and change everything. After Edwin's death, the guilt of knowing that the girl had never even tried to talk to the young man weighed heavily on her. However, now, standing in front of him, she couldn't say it out loud. Therefore, watching the reaction of the stranger, the prince began to understand what could be the matter. He watched her timidity and nervousness firmly and assertively, into which his question had led him. Edwin asked bluntly what there was, and the possibility that the lady was in love with him. Being on the verge of panic from the revealed panic, the blonde realized that he was right. Therefore, in order to further introduce the girl into a situation of stress, he approached her. The only thing she could do was take a barely noticeable step back and deny what she had said. But then, according to this statement, Kate should have hated the prince. However, she did not feel this feeling for him either. The guy clarified whether guilt was the only reason why she decided to save him. If this was really the case, then the guy did not want to detain the girl any longer with his person. He really thought that things would be different if she could figure it out. Looking at the guy's retreating figure, she couldn't miss the last chance that was given to her. Kate overtook him again and blocked the road with herself. The repetition of the situation made the guy very angry, so he demanded that she back down. The girl realized that, as if all her attempts would not lead to the result she wanted. Edwin, therefore, demanded to know another reason why he could not ride in the carriage. The guy did not understand what reasons he had to stay alive. The question began to run through Kate's mind, and she struggled to find the answer herself. Standing in front of him, the girl did not understand why she did not give a damn about his life. Remembering the assumption that the heroine liked the prince, she understood what to say as a reason for him to want to move on with his life. In her feelings, she shouted at the guy that she really didn't like him. After a pause, Kate sincerely admitted that she loved Edwin. The man clearly did not expect such a confession, so he was extremely surprised. For the first time, the heroine confessed her feelings to someone, so now she hoped that her lover would listen to her. However, he was so stunned that he didn't know what to say. After a second, he grinned, because it was naive to think that because of the girl's confession alone, he would say something like he would live for her. Now he wanted to get into the carriage even more than before, and the heroine sincerely could not understand this desire. However, taking off his mask of merriment, Edwin said that he wished to die again. He sincerely hoped that everyone who cared about him would suffer because of this. Kate was shocked by what she heard and felt the ground slip from under her feet. Although it seemed to her before in her past life that this person was broken from the inside, in her mind, the girl tried to understand how the guy became like this. She remembered the look he had given her when they first met, and it was in him that she saw a silent call for help and hope. Kate asked to answer only one of her questions. The blonde agreed if she would no longer disturb his peace after that. With a downcast mood, the heroine asked about the benefits that the prince would receive in the event of his death. She tried to understand why he was acting like a man who was in such a hurry to die. These words made the guy think. In a burst of thought, he approached his lady. His face was very close to hers, so he said the answer barely audible so that no one else could hear it. And the words made the girl very surprised. After answering, he left her, reminding her of his promise not to bother him again, but Kate did not dare to move in shock. It was a quiet, peaceful night in the Marquis mansion. The girl was lying in her room, but could not sleep. Her thoughts were only about the prince and his fate. She instinctively followed the ear that his breath had touched that evening. Over and over again, she remembered the words he had said to her. In this death, Edwin saw salvation from his earthly torments and a blessing to escape from life. Whether that meant that he was in so much pain that death was the best way out, that was a question that worried Kate late into the night. Her eyes were full of regret for not knowing so much about the blonde's life, but she was hurt for him. Out of helplessness, she covered her face with her hand as she tried to think of other options. The girl sincerely understood what she had to do now. With these thoughts, she did not notice how she fell asleep, but very soon she found herself in a bright space. Kate was trying to figure out where to be because she was exactly in her room 5 minutes ago. However, there was nothing but bright whiteness around. Suddenly, she heard strange noises that grew louder with each passing moment. It was crying, so the heroine did not hesitate to go in the direction of the sound. She wondered whose it might be. Suddenly, before her eyes, the girl saw the scene of her farewell at Edwin's coffin and her sobs over his body. She realized that she had heard her own crying. Kate recognized herself at the funeral of the prince. However, after a moment, she noticed that there was a man behind her whom she had not seen that day. After the heroine noticed that the man saw her, she asked who he was. This was a man who looked like Edwin in adulthood, and he only said that everything would soon become clear. At these words, the girl abruptly woke up in her bed, and it was already morning outside. Rising from the pillow, Kate realized that it was just a dream. She remembered the image of this strange man who had told her that she would soon understand everything herself. However, she did not want to think about this either, since there was a day left before Edwin's death. The girl could not see him like this again, lying in a coffin. She wouldn't survive it again. That same day, Kate went to the library. The guy, as always, sat in his hall and read the same book. Addressing him and the appearance of the girl made him distracted again. The brown-haired woman again called the prince by name with a request not to ride in the carriage, forcing him to put down the book. The situation was worse than she had anticipated, although confessing her feelings to him gave her strength. The girl recalled that death meant the absence of existence in this world. However, the prince recalled that the lady had promised not to bother him anymore. Ignoring this remark, the girl asked about a dear creature in this world, for example, a pet that could please him. She couldn't believe that he wasn't sorry not to see something like this again. However, Edwin immediately admitted that he did not like such things. But the girl did not give up and reminded about some dream of the guy that he would like to achieve. The blonde's patience snapped, and putting down the book, he told her that there was nothing of value to him in this world. Nothing could bring him joy in this world and make him change his mind. Kate couldn't believe what she was saying, because fixing the situation now seemed impossible. Hiding her eyes in the floor, the heroine nevertheless reminded that there was a reason. Such a bold statement made the guy pay full attention. Looking up at her beloved, the girl said that she could be the reason. Such confidence confused the prince, and he did not understand where it came from. It seemed absurd because he had met this girl 2 days ago. But for Kate, everything was completely different. She regretted that she had been bad at communicating and could not explain that in a past life they had known each other for much longer. Lowering her eyes to the floor, she looked at her hands, which were about to give up. She could hardly find the words anyway, but nothing at all chilled him. Suddenly, a faint silhouette appeared behind him, like a mist. Horror and surprise formed in Kate's eyes from what she saw. She only looked at the familiar phantom, but Edwin still teased her about not being able to look into his eyes. At that moment, she pointed behind the guy with fear. There was a man from the dream who looked like Edwin himself. Kate couldn't make a sound. The only thing she said with a stutter was that it was a ghost. After a pause, the silence was broken by the prince, who turned to the frightened lady. He clarified whether the girl could see him. The lady couldn't control her feelings, and the fact that the prince knew about him could mean that the guy had seen him too. In the absence of an answer, the prince grabbed the girl by the shoulders and turned her towards him. He needed to know how often she saw things like this. However, she admitted that she saw this in real life for the first time. The rest was only in dreams. Edwin paused in thought, analyzing what he had heard. The next moment, he grabbed her by the arm and asked her to follow him. The blonde promised to answer any of her questions, if only she would follow him. Because of the unexpected touch, the girl thought only about their hands, although she blamed herself for such strange thoughts at such and such a moment. As she ran out of the hall, she hurriedly looked back at the ghost that was still there. He was standing in the very place where Edwin was sitting with the book. The couple went out into the garden, which was full of fountains and beautiful benches. The young man decided to ask the girl once again if he had seen this for the first time. Noticing the silence, he looked back at her, and the reason was in his hand, which he did not stop holding. Therefore, Kate asked to let her go first, because her thoughts were confused from excitement. Such timidity really stunned the prince. He was impatient, so he angrily pulled his hand away and asked his question again. Doubting the integrity of her mind, the girl clarified whether the guy meant the figure that was behind him. Kate repeated that it was the first time she had seen her in reality, but the prince remembered that the girl had mentioned that she had seen her in a dream. However, the reason for this thought was that last night the heroine had seen a man in a dream who looked like this phantom. Repeating the girl's words, the prince plunged into thought. Kate wanted to clarify whether the guy had seen this image before. But the question seemed stupid to the young man, because if he hadn't met him, he wouldn't have asked the girl about him like that. The heroine felt stupid, so she herself began to wonder if it was a real ghost. An image from the reading room of the library with a lonely figure popped up in my head. Edwin confessed that he himself did not know what the thing was. And since they were united by a common secret, the guy decided to confess one secret to his new acquaintance. He appealed to her to get out of her thoughts. The blonde suggested that the girl imagine that the phantom could be a ghost. However, he wanted the girl to describe what he looked like. She began to describe the image with her hair combed to the side, about 40 years old for the age of a man. His gaze was marked by great melancholy and fatigue for the second meeting. The fact that the phantom looked like the prince himself made Edwin wonder. He immediately interrupted the girl and asked if she had seen his face. Succumbing to emotions, the man approached the girl, repeating the question. She was worried that she could make him angry again, so she answered in the affirmative. The fact that the face of the ghost was clearly shown to the girl was a revelation to Edwin. From strong emotions, the prince fell on a nearby bench. Kate hurried to help the young man, who became ill. Clutching his head from a large number of thoughts, the guy realized that he did not matter at all. In the complete silence of the beautiful evening, Edwin voiced that the ghost was the late king of the country and his own father. He became a phantom and began to look after his son. The girl realized that she had a feeling that she had seen him somewhere before. Once upon a time in my childhood, in a town square full of a large number of people, a king in heavy metal armor rode past her on horseback as part of the victory parade. It wasn't even that he looked like Edwin. The girl decided to interrupt the shock of her lover, so she turned to him. However, the guy's strange, frightened look indicated that there was something behind the girl. It was the Phantom King who was watching them. His face was filled with seriousness. The girl did not understand from what moment he was there and listened to them. The ghost opened his mouth and uttered only one sentence. It said that his son was supposed to live. Kate unconsciously repeated the phrase, which caused Edwin to ask again what the lady was talking about. He was shocked that she could hear what he was saying. The king was smiling because now he could pass messages to his son. Turning around, the couple did not see the figure because it evaporated in the air. The heroine again decided to clarify the reason why her father was watching the prince. Now the girl clearly felt that she could help her beloved. However, the guy still could not understand why the girl was ready to help him. From excitement, the heroine could not say the thought clearly. Edwin continued to look at her directly. Therefore, seeing no way out, she admitted that she did not want to see his suffering again. For a while, the prince stood in thought, and to the great happiness of the girl, he nevertheless agreed not to get into the carriage. The girl jumped up from her seat in surprise. However, in return, the blonde demanded a deal. The very day came, the 5th of October, the day of Edwin's death. The day when the carriage capsized on the way to the palace. The very date that was full of sorrow and sorrow for any person. In the courtyard stood a carriage drawn by 2 white stallions. Edwin stood beside her, as if he were about to sit in it. Kate was rushing as fast as she could towards her lover. She shouted his name, to which the young man turned around. She gripped his hand tightly, reminding him of her promise not to get into the carriage. Her breath was lost by a long run and excitement. The blonde man was surprised how the girl found out about his whereabouts. However, it did not matter at all, because an agreement was concluded between them. Pulling his hand away in irritation, the guy did not understand what was more important to the lady, that he could die or break the agreement between them. Edwin, however, remarked that the lady was a truly kind person. Unfortunately, however, in his opinion, he knew how to keep his word. And his presence next to the carriage was only due to the delivery of a letter to the royal court. Handing it to the coachman, the guy approached the girl. With a victorious smile, the prince proved that he had no intention of deceiving the girl. The man struck the reins on the horse's sides, and the carriage drove off empty. Kate repeated the idea that the guy really didn't get into the carriage. Intending to ask a question, the prince looked at the girl's face and stopped in mid-sentence. Kate cried again with a smile on her face, and he sincerely did not understand the reason for this. However, the empty carriage moving away into the distance was a great relief for her. She was sincerely glad that the young man would not die that day. Such emotions on the lady's face caused embarrassment in the blonde. Not knowing how to react to this, the guy turned away from the girl, saying that he did not want to see her tears. Kate gratefully accepted his words that he would be waiting for her as soon as she cleaned up. The girl's figure began to move away in the other direction. However, unexpectedly, Edwin's jacket, which was covering her, fell on her head. He explained his action by the fact that he did not want to see her tear-stained face even by accident, so he asked to hide it. The girl gratefully accepted this demand. However, Edwin pulled the cloth over her face even harder, for the sweet expression on her face made him embarrassed. After that, he turned around to go about his business. The heroine could only watch the silhouette moving away from her. Such actions caused only a smile and pleasant feelings in her. She remembered the night they had made a deal. Katie could not believe her happiness that the prince would not ride in the carriage, but the man did not want to repeat his words twice. She thanked her lover for such a decision. However, the guy warned that it was too early to rejoice because he was offering a deal. From that moment on, the lady was supposed to convey the ghost's words. It was on this condition that the young man agreed to fulfill the request of the girl herself. Kate gladly agreed to make this simple request. She looked genuinely happy, and it was natural that her goal had been accomplished. Edwin still couldn't realize that he was something important to her. Could such a trifle really make this stranger so happy? The blonde man took death more easily because he understood that if not this time, then the next time fate would take his life. The girl did not understand whether this meant that the guy could still die in the near future. The prince wanted to know if his lady would believe him if he told her. With a smile, the heroine admitted that she would believe him because he expressed such trust in her, believing her words. However, the young man hurried to fix her soap because he did not believe her. The time was approaching 6 in the evening, so the prince warned that the conversation about the ghost would take place another day. Having slept soundly all night, the girl woke up only at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She slept through the morning time of getting up. Her body relaxed due to the fact that Edwin was not involved in the accident. However, even if it was so, she was still worried. Because of the lateness of the hour, she hurried to the library to give Edwin the jacket while he was still there. However, there was a knock at the door, and the young lady hurried to let the guest in. It was Ron who greeted the girl, smiling at her with his friendly smile. She clearly did not expect such a visit, because her father did not warn her about it. The couple went to the guest room for a conversation. Ron apologized for frightening the girl because he thought that he was aware of his visit, so he went to her room. However, Kate did not understand what she was supposed to know about. It turned out that the Marquis had ordered a dress for Kate on the occasion of her 19th birthday. And indeed, from worries and other affairs, the girl forgot about her holiday, which was to take place very soon. Footage from her childhood appeared before her eyes, how her dad left her a box with a gift. However, he still gave all his attention to Rosalind. Of course, the girl received gifts, although they did not mean anything to father and daughter. The blonde noticed that after his words, the girl's face turned very pale. He was afraid that it was because of his proposal, so he hurried to apologize. Of course, it wasn't just because of Ron's words. Pulling a smile on her face, Kate asked to speed up because she was in a hurry. The man began to correct the seams on the almost finished dress, which sat well on the girl's figure. He continued to take measurements for a long time until sunset. She knew that Ron had married her only to expand his boutique, which was why he was so insistent now. Imperceptibly, she looked at his features while the man was busy with business. Of course, Kate didn't love him anymore, although she remembered the beginning of their story in the past. The girl also watched the man's face the last time he came to take measurements. Noticing that the girl was looking at him, the blonde man was clearly embarrassed. Then he straightened her hair behind her ear, which also brought them very close in communication. While the heroine was reminiscing, the tailor announced the end of the work. He said that he would take the girl to the mansion in 2 days. Although the girl hesitated to her ex-husband, she no longer had any reason to get closer to him. From the window, the girl watched the figure of the tailor move away from the building. With sadness, she realized that it would be better for both of them. Kate noticed again that the time was approaching evening, and she still had to make it to the library. She ran away from the window just as Ron turned to the window where he expected to see her figure. However, she was not there, and the guy smiled smugly. The girl ran to the library as fast as she could, but the room was empty, and on the shelf lay the book that Edwin was reading. As she approached the window, she realized that she was too late, but she was distracted by the prince's book, which was called The Cyclic Sequence. The book talked about Bella, who took out a pocket knife and brought it to her wrist without hesitation. The heroine of the book had only one goal: to cut her wrist with a knife, which did not scare her. This book was a novel that tells about the tragic love story of Arthur and Bella. At the beginning of the story, After Arthur's death, his lover tried to follow him to the afterlife, but in the process, she heard his voice, which demanded that she live. She saw the figure of Arthur in front of her. Her lover appeared to her in a ghostly form. After reading a few pages, the girl realized that the story of the book coincided with the reality in which the prince found himself. Bella, who was about to die from the loss of her beloved, and Edwin, who seeks salvation in death. But in addition to these two characters, there was something else. This is the image of Edwin's father in the form of a ghost who tried to save him. Kate put the owner's book back in its place. The girl thought that even if this world was the universe of the novel, she was only a minor character who passed by. The next day was very sunny and pleasant. The prince sat in the park and read his book, as he always did. Across from him sat Kate, who felt less comfortable. The girl made excuses for being late for the library meeting the night before, but the blonde man didn't want to listen. However, the heroine did not understand what promise she broke, according to her lover. Closing the book, Edwin reminded him that he had promised to continue the conversation next time. The carriage left on the 5th, and the present day was the 7th. The girl began to understand what the prince meant. According to this remark of the man, everything said that the man was waiting for the girl last evening. However, the prince refused to admit this because he was simply infuriated by the fact that the girl did not keep her word. The heroine apologized because she did not know that that conversation was a promise. The arrogant young man promised to forgive the girl for this, but only for the first and last time. Suddenly, the lady turned her attention to the book and wanted to ask a question about it. She admitted that after yesterday's reading, she realized that the heroine looked like a prince, so perhaps the man continued to read her. However, the blonde wearily noticed that the girl always had so many questions. The guy admitted that this book was one person's favorite work until his death. By that very person, Kate understood who her interlocutor meant. Edwin confirmed that he really meant his late father. From his childhood, Edwin's father read this book aloud to him. The heroine could not believe that this book was a favorite of the king. Unexpectedly, the girl suggested that perhaps the book could be a clue to the situation with the ghost. She justified this by the fact that the whole situation was so unusual, because the history of the book repeated reality. Such curiosity of the lady began to irritate the prince, so he rudely clarified who asked her to dig into this. Edwin recalled that he had only asked the girl to convey the ghost's words to him. Such an angry expression frightened the girl. Without having time to answer, the guy cut off her thought by asking her to forget about it. Edwin got up from his seat, intending to leave, as he did not count that today a ghost could appear. Suddenly, for herself, Kate asked her lover not to leave and grabbed him by the sleeve. She pointed to the space in front of her, to the place where the ghost of the man had appeared. In surprise, Edwin immediately turned towards his father's silhouette. The king looked at the guys with great sadness in his eyes. After that, he began to pronounce a certain phrase with his lips, which only a girl could hear. Kate's eyes widened in surprise, and she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The figure immediately disappeared. When Edwin had calmed down, he asked what his father had said. But Kate didn't answer, being in a daze, so the guy grabbed her by the shoulders and asked it again. The girl's silence infuriated him. From the fact that strong hands shook her, the heroine came out of her stupor and noticed that she saw the prince in such a state for the first time. She promised to tell the prince the king's words, but her eyes fell on one thing. Kate wanted to make a deal. Being impressed, the girl asked to study the content of the book with her by the end of the day in exchange for words. She repeated this request over and over again, taking the book into her hands. Such a sharp impudence made the guy confused. Now, after a few moments, Kate realized that she dared to set conditions for the prince, even though they already had a contract. In addition, the wording was similar to an invitation to a date, so the girl was very embarrassed. The girl could not find a place for herself from shame, because these words were heard not only by Edwin, but also by his father. Putting aside all jokes, Edwin asked again about the lady's daring to threaten him with the words of a ghost. Kate immediately rushed to apologize for such impudence. However, she did not give up in her guesses, so she explained that discussing it together could help them. The prince gave up, as he did not understand such stubbornness of the girl. He asked her to follow him, and the girl realized to herself that her request was very unreasonable. Going further and further, the blonde man asked his companion about the place. Not understanding what he was talking about, the prince explained that he meant the place where the girl wanted to go to read the book. Looking at her, Edwin declared that he would follow her wherever she wanted. Confused, Kate explained that there was no such place, so she trusted the prince's choice because he had an idea where she could study the documents. The man's steps were wide, so the girl had to run a little to keep up with him. Following her lover full of joy, she began to ask him to wait for her. They spent the whole day studying the materials, so the first thing they did was go to the archives. The prince also showed her ancient buildings and estates in which there could be hiding places, and in the end, they even interviewed local residents. To summarize the information received in the evening, the girl offered to sit in a cafe with a cup of tea. Kate admitted that she thought that the Lord would definitely refuse her such a request. Sitting opposite the girl, the guy admitted that it was not a request but a threat, so he had no choice. Such a perception of the situation amused the girl because only the prince accepted her words as a threat. With coldness and indifference, the young man explained that he did not want to be fooled by the threats behind which there were obvious ulterior motives, but he needed to know his father's words. There were no other reasons, so the guy didn't want the girl to think that he had any feelings for her. Unexpectedly, after a pause, Kate asked if the man knew her name, but he really didn't, although she even knew his full name. This was not surprising, because he was a prince and his name could not be compared with the name of a girl, since everyone in the kingdom knew him. With a smile, she agreed with the interlocutor's idea, but explained that her name was very dear to her. For a moment, the blonde's movements stopped, and the cup of tea stopped near his lips. Edwin said her name aloud, which made the girl shudder. Putting the cup of tea on the saucer, the guy asked again if he remembered her name correctly. In addition to the abbreviated name, the blonde also remembered her full name, Kathy Gerald. And the heroine was still silent in surprise, so when the pause dragged on, the girl corrected the pronunciation of her short name from Kat to Kate. She plunged into childhood memories of running to meet her grandmother. As a girl, she tried to hug her when she met. The woman called her granddaughter an affectionate kitten who snuggled up to her skirt. The girl did not like that her grandmother distorted her name into a word that was consonant with the word cat. She amused herself with her granddaughter, so she gave her sweets, despite her father's prohibitions to restrict food. Kate's grandmother left their family a long time ago, but she was the only person who gave the girl love. On her deathbed, the woman asked for forgiveness from her tearful granddaughter for leaving her alone. The last thing she said before her death was that she called her granddaughter her favorite kitten. Returning to reality, the girl mentally turned to her late grandmother with the thought that she did not expect to hear this nickname after a while. Hearing Kathy's name again, she couldn't control her emotions, and tears rolled down her cheeks non-stop. What he saw shocked the guy, because he did not expect that he would upset the girl so much by saying her name incorrectly. However, Kate hastened to explain that she was called by such a nickname by a very dear person. The heroine began to apologize for this situation, but the prince explained that he had had enough of the lady's words and apologies. Wiping away her tears, she noticed that the prince began to hesitate in words and actions. Suddenly, the girl remembered that she had not told about the king's words all day. This made the man pay attention to her and look into her eyes again. At that moment, the king asked for forgiveness. Repeating the phantom's words, Kate confirmed that the ghost had said those words. Hearing this, the blonde man remarked with irritation that the girl was crying again. Not wanting to anger her lover again, she immediately began to deny it in a panic. In her mind, she knew that Edwin's father and grandmother had been so similar when they apologized to those they had to leave behind, when suddenly a soft cloth touched her face. The prince approached his companion and began to wipe her tears because he could not look at them. Leaving his handkerchief to the girl, he explained that he hated tears. Stunned by such intimacy, the only thing Kate could utter was gratitude. Noticing the sunset, Edwin noticed that it was late, and they had to go home. Saying a dry goodbye, the blonde man turned to the exit, but he was stopped by the lady's question about when she needed to return his handkerchief. But he was not interested in him, so the prince asked to throw him out. Clutching the handkerchief in her hands, the heroine was left alone near the table, where she gave free rein to her emotions. Every night, the girl continued to have the same dream. People usually say that dreams are nothing more than the embodiment of useless thoughts. In that dream, the heroine watched a happy Edwin as a child. If the dreams were so similar, could useless thoughts be combined, in the girl's opinion? She was standing on the field and looking at Edwin hugging his mother, but a voice came from behind her asking for forgiveness. Next to him was the king, who was watching the carefree scene in the same way as Kate. The girl admitted that the man was very similar to his son and her grandmother. She watched with a smile the stranger, who unexpectedly became a guide to his son. The next moment, a bright flash lit up the space around her, and Kate had to close herself from surprise. When she opened her eyes, she noticed that the atmosphere around her had changed. It was the scene of the king's funeral, and little Edwin stood beside the coffin, who no longer smiled as carelessly as before. His small figure was full of grief and sorrow for his dead father, who had left him. Seeing the phantom's hand, which was pointing in a certain direction at the boy, the girl was taken aback. Turning around at the man's figure, an amazing picture appeared before her eyes. The king's body dissolved in a flock of beautiful butterflies, and the man himself asked to grant salvation to his son. Outside the window, birds were singing on branches empty of leaves. Kate woke up from her dream quite abruptly, but it was already morning outside. Because of the dream, she wanted to go and meet Edwin, but today they did not arrange a meeting. Realizing this, the girl recalled that she had been constantly pestering the prince lately, so most likely he would be angry with an unexpected meeting. Kate was distracted from such sad thoughts by a knock on the door. She allowed the guest to enter the hall. It was Ron, the tailor, who had arrived with a new ready-made dress, so she had to keep her promise. He handed the girl the box and offered to try it on. Having finished the process of changing, the girl came out from behind the curtain, asking the man's opinion about her appearance. However, as soon as he looked at the girl, the blonde man was speechless. A dress with a deep neckline and full of lace and jewelry was very suitable for the hostess, making her even more beautiful. The man was in a stupor and just silently looked at the girl, so she called him again. Kate thought she looked strange, but Ron hurried to get up and confirm otherwise. He took her hand, which he kissed as a compliment, as she looked beautiful. Embarrassed, the girl snatched her hand and thanked her for her opinion. The girl continued as if nothing had happened, but Ron's expression changed to a more surprised one. In an instant, he grabbed the girl's hand, which she had removed from his palm earlier. He stretched his hand towards him, holding it very tightly. The blonde's eyes were in a frenzy, and his lips no longer expressed their former smile. Such a change of mood frightened the girl. Coming to his senses, the man let go of the girl's brush and explained that it seemed to him that only a thread was sticking out of the sleeve, but admitted that it was rude. He asked for permission to correct this shortcoming, claiming that it would not take long. The smile and friendliness returned to the young man's face. Having no reason to refuse, Kate agreed to it. Ron began to take his sewing kit from the inside pocket of his coat. As the tailor did his work, she thought again about what Ron's thoughts had been in those moments. Surprisingly, such situations had already happened a couple of times in her past, so an image of her being in his atelier, where he was also fixing her sleeve, appeared before her eyes. If he found a small flaw on the clothes he created, then he corrected it right on the spot, but it was not without injuries. And even now, Ron had pierced his finger to the point of bleeding again. Forgetting herself, Kate warned Ron that she had already asked him to use a thimble for such work. However, the tailor did not understand what the girl was talking about. Realizing reality, the heroine tried to get out of an uncomfortable situation, explaining her words with care. She couldn't mix memories from past and present lives and confuse them. Such care made the blonde very happy, because at that moment the mistress seemed cute to him. This scene with Ron smiling sweetly, Kate could not look away, as she did not understand why, of all the people in the world, he considered her cute. She recalled moments from the past when she showed concern for her husband. However, earlier he vaingloriously and rudely brushed off her advice, recommending not to interfere in his work. After a while, Ron announced that he had finished the work by putting the needle in a set. The man again turned to the girl who drooped from something. The tailor asked to be invited to a festive banquet to see the lady dancing in his dress. However, remembering the past torments, she really wanted to refuse him, but now she had no reason to do so. Although now Ron did not look like her ex-husband from her previous life. But the girl could not forget about the betrayal and rude treatment of her, so she did not dare to allow herself to get close to a man. Memories enveloped the girl every time and weighed heavily on her. He thanked the girl for agreeing. Overwork and stress made it difficult for Kate to keep her concentration. She immediately made it clear that there was no reason to worry, so she just sat down on the sofa. The tailor left the hall, recommending the mistress to rest, but her head has been splitting since the morning. Remembering the dream, she did not leave the feeling that she had forgotten something. The girl recalled that behind the crying Edwin in the dream stood the figure of a man whose face she remembered only now. There were only 3 of them, and the brunette's face was turned towards the girl completely, while his hands comforted the child. Remembering this, the girl seemed to have moved away from sleep. She wondered who she could meet eyes in her own dream. Kate stopped Ron, who was already standing gathered on the threshold, by asking if the tailor knew anything about Lord Edwin. Remembering this name, he asked if the lady meant the so-called abandoned prince. The girl heard about this story and phrase for the first time, although it turned out to be popular among the people. A large number of questions fell on Ron, so taking off his outerwear, the guy asked the lady to calm down. Ron walked over to her and touched her arm, promising to answer all her questions. Kate had a hard time tolerating his touch, but he knew the information that was important to her. She had lived in her father's mansion all her life, cut off from the world, and no one had ever told her about such a thing. Even when she found out that he was a prince, Kate did not try to find out anything more detailed about his life, because to her he was the Edwin of the library. However, now, in order to help her lover, she had to find out the biography of his family. The girl wanted to understand the reason why the throne that belonged to Edwin by inheritance was given to another. Ron explained that when the prince was young, King Licht-Windsor died suddenly. The country went into great decline without a ruler, and there was someone who removed these problems. It was the king's brother, Benson Windsor. He was the younger brother and was now the current king of the country. The girl was outraged by such a relationship because the throne was supposed to pass to Edwin. But the tailor could not know the real reasons. However, the blonde boldly assumed that the prince was a rather unpleasant person. It was rumored that before starting a dialogue, he always sighed heavily, as if society was stressing him out. So over time, everyone turned away from him, even those who wanted to put him on the throne. But these were only assumptions because, in any case, a real king has always had a talent for politics. After his accession to the throne and the change of political course, there were people who began to praise him as a saint. People loved their ruler, so he was able to enlist the support of ordinary citizens. However, then it was not clear why he exiled his nephew to the outskirts and did not settle him in the palace. After Benson became king, the late king's wife, Lichta, became his wife. Edwin's mother betrayed the decision of her son and her late husband to stay at court. It was hard for the girl to believe this story. Ron was surprised that the girl was not aware, because then there was a strong scandal throughout the country. A large number of people disliked the queen for remarrying immediately after the death of her first husband. The prince ended up on the outskirts after their wedding. It seemed as if he had been chased away from there, so Edwin received such a nickname. The story made a strong impression on the girl. She drooped greatly because she could not believe in the reality of such a nightmare. The tailor did not understand the reason for the lady's interest in such a story, but Kate explained that she just saw the prince and became interested. Ron was pleased with the answer, but a little wary. The time was already extremely late, and morning turned into evening. The man hurried to leave, so he once again repeated his recommendations for the girl's rest. After the slam of the closed door, the girl breathed a sigh of relief, but the story weighed heavily on her. She was sorry for the fate of Edwin, who was called abandoned. She reproached herself for not trying to find out his past, because he was left completely alone after his father's death. A little lonely girl, Kathy, understood the boy's sadness like no one else. Perhaps this is why the king wanted to apologize to Edwin. However, looking at the beautiful sunset, the heroine could not understand why she could also see the spirit of the king. A servant knocked on the door of Kate's sleeping bag, who notified the mistress that the handkerchief had been washed. The woman left the cloth on the table, for which the girl thanked her. Having finished styling her hair, the girl went to the table. She remembered the prince's words to get rid of the headscarf, but she couldn't. Pressing the handkerchief with her hands, she remembered the evening when her lover removed her tears. The girl's embarrassment from such memories reached a peak. Opening her eyes, she noticed one detail that was on the fabric of the handkerchief. On the corner of the handkerchief were embroidered the initials of the prince. The day was very pleasant and sunny. The girl came to her usual reading room, where she met Edwin again. Kate greeted the guy affably, as she was glad to see him. However, the man was stressed by such attention, so he asked the lady to go about her business. Despite the rude refusal, the heroine was glad that Edwin did not change in character in one day. The pleasant expression on his face did not escape the blonde's attention, so he assumed that the girl liked it when they talked to her like that. The girl denied this and explained that she had come to give the headscarf. The man's gaze fell on the thing that the lady was handing him. He reminded her that he had asked to get rid of her, and he became annoyed that the girl was forcing him to repeat the same words. However, Kate assumed that the handkerchief was dear to the owner. The prince liked the idea, and with a smirk, he decided to clarify what led the girl to such conclusions. Without hesitation, the heroine unfolded the fabric and pointed to the embroidery. The man's eyes opened in surprise, due to the fact that his companion found his nickname Eddie. He remembered sitting on his mother's lap reading a book. However, the corner of his mouth was dirty with chocolate, so his mother hurried to wipe the boy's mouth with a handkerchief. Mom laughed at her sweet son and affectionately called him Eddie. These memories made the man angry, so he jumped up abruptly. With great pain, he transgressed through himself. Edwin admitted that he no longer needed this thing. The girl looked helplessly at the figure of the prince. Turning around, he silently walked away from the table, but at the last moment Kate stopped him. She asked permission to take the handkerchief for herself. Such a request seemed strange to the blonde. Coming to his senses, Edwin reminded him that she would throw him away or keep him for herself. He was not interested in things that did not belong to him. As he took the book from the bookshelf, he heard the girl's voice behind him. This time the blonde man could not stand it, and turning around he immediately began to clarify why the girl always bothers him. However, the heroine pressed the guy's mouth with her hand and did not let him finish. This action stunned Edwin, but Kate began to apologize. She recalled that there were a lot of people in the library now, so he shouldn't have snapped at her and shouted at her like that. The blonde man thought about these words. Freeing himself from her hand, he asked what Kate wanted to say before he interrupted her. Clutching an envelope with an invitation to her birthday behind her back, the girl could not muster up the courage to give it to her beloved. The guy saw the doubts of his companion, but he was annoyed by such slowness. As a result, the heroine reduced the topic to a conversation about a ghost, not daring to give an invitation. In the guy's head, such a question did not fit in his head, since the girl distracted him and even crossed his personal boundaries. Seeing the irritation on the prince's face and immediately hesitated in her explanation, he leaned closer to her face to look more closely into her eyes to find the truth. The only thing she could come up with was the idea of working out a detailed plan of action, so the man stepped back from the blushing girl. However, in these actions, Edwin saw Kate's possible crush on him, so he mocked the situation a little. Therefore, I continued to look seriously into her face, waiting for a reaction and explanation. At some point, the guy clarified whether they could have met earlier. Kate thought she was imagining it, and the prince asked something else. However, Edwin usually did not forget the people he knew, so for some reason he remembered how he exchanged glances with Kate in the past. The girl admitted that although this happened, but only once, a memory of the girl's figure in the library flashed before the prince's eyes. It dawned on him that it was then that he remembered one detail. Such a remark interested Kate. She also remembered the standing figure of the man on that sunny evening, as well as his eyes, which reflected her silhouette. It dawned on the heroine that at that moment the ghost of the late king was standing next to her. Edwin confirmed his companion's guess, but for a moment he was surprised. The prince was surprised that she couldn't see the ghost then, and that it happened after going back in time. That is why, at the first meeting, Kate said that she saw a ghost for the first time in her life. The guy began to remember the words as well. The lady was very happy again, which was evident from her face. She explained that she was so glad at that moment that the prince believed her. Placing his hand on Kate's shoulder, the prince confirmed that there were things in the world that could not be explained rationally. He decided to ask her if she knew the reason for all this or not. At the same moment, the girl felt the presence of the phantom, and turning around, she saw it behind her back. The prince explained that even now he did not trust the girl, but the reality was that her words seemed to have more truth. For some reason, Licht was very surprised this time and looked directly at Kate. Grinning, he hinted to the girl about the letter that she had in her hands. Forgetting herself, the lady began to answer the ghost that she could not give it away. Edwin clarified what his father had said as the king's hand reached for his son's face. He touched his cheek a second before he disappeared. His words were declarations of love. In a moment, the silhouette of the phantom disappeared. While the blonde man was in shock from the fact that he felt the ghost's hand, the girl, blushing, tried to say something to him. Taking out an envelope, Kate said that her birthday was coming soon, but she would tell the king's words if the prince came to it. The blonde's look showed that he could not believe in such a provocation. In her mind, at that moment, the girl thought that it was his father who forced her to do this. Snatching the envelope from the girl's hands, Edwin was clearly cursing all conditional transactions. Turning around, the prince recalled that he had asked the girl not to make a cute expression. It was with such an absent-minded expression that Kate remained in the library. A few days later, in the evening, a solemn ball began in the Marquis mansion. Musicians played strange instruments, creating dance music for ladies and gentlemen. The hall whirled in a beautiful waltz, and people stood along the perimeter, making small talk. One lady was especially gifted with painful attention. It was Rosalind, who had gathered a large number of gentlemen around her. Watching her sister from the balcony, Kate realized that her sister had remained the same and continued to enjoy Kate's holidays as if they were her own. The girl thought about the invitation she had given to the prince. Her heart fluttered with doubt that he would come to the feast. At that moment, a new melody began to play in the hall with the leading part of the violin. The waltzing couples danced with a new solemn force. The girl continued to wait boredly for her companion. A voice came from behind her that suggested that she was very tired of the holiday. Turning to the speaker, Kate expected to see Edwin. Eyes met a familiar face. The figure was standing at the entrance to the balcony opposite her. However, contrary to all expectations, it was Ron who was holding a large box in his hands. The girl had been waiting for her prince all evening so much that she could not hide her disappointment on her face. The blonde was concerned that the traitor was standing alone on the balcony on her holiday. Trying to answer the question, the girl had only thoughts in her head that Edwin would probably not come after all. The prince embraced Kate's emotions more and more with every second. Coming to his senses, the guy began to approach the girl, apologizing for his lateness. Holding out the box, Ron congratulated the girl on her holiday and presented his gift, which he wanted to give personally. Accepting the box, she thanked her for your attention with an indifferent expression on her face. Clearing his throat, the guy hinted that the gift was handmade, so he had to be late to finish it. Kate noticed Ron's cough. Forgetting herself, she reminded the guy that she told him to wear a scarf because he always got sick easily. However, at the same second, the heroine realized that she had made a mistake because she again confused her memories with reality. The blonde did not understand when he managed to talk about the specifics of his health, but Kate confirmed that this was for sure. Such attention and concern of the lady flattered Ron very much. He considered this a good moment to make their relationship closer, so he approached her. Embarrassedly stretching out his hand to her hair, the young man admitted that from the very first sight he saw her, he dreamed of being next to her. At the same moment, however, Edwin appeared between them, who was very displeased with the banquet. The prince grabbed the girl by the palm, which frightened Kate. The guy continued to express indignation at the fact that the birthday girl could not be found in the hall where he was waiting for her. Almost mentioning the second reason for his anger, he turned toward Ron. He was really looking for a girl around the house because she invited him, so he reproached her for bad manners. Edwin immediately warned that he had not come for her. After all, the real reason was an agreement with Kate that she would tell him his father's words. In her mind, the heroine noticed that with the appearance of the prince, her mood changed dramatically, and she felt a huge relief. However, the man again warned her not to make such a face. Ron called out to Edwin from behind him and explained that he had not expected His Highness to come to the feast. The prince was also familiar with the tailor, and at that moment the box with Ron's gift was picked up because it fell at that unexpected moment. Noticing Kate's confusion, the blonde explained that he had sewed clothes for his master several times. Smiling, he admitted that he did not know that his beloved and the prince were acquainted. Any mention of him and Kate irritated Edwin, so he immediately indicated that he was not someone close to her. The whole company was distracted from the conversation by a new female voice, which was also surprised at the birthday girl's acquaintance with the prince. It was Rosalind, who bowed in deep curtsy to Edwin, showing respect. After being asked who she was to Kate, she revealed that she was her older sister. She immediately began to gain everyone's attention, explaining that it would be better if the prince contacted Kate's family first for an invitation. And while the heroine began to be seized by negative emotions again, the blonde rudely made it clear that he was not interested in communicating with the interlocutor. He explained that he saw no point in talking to her and the tailor on this balcony because he had come for a different reason. Without explaining anything, he took Kate's hand and asked her to come with him. From such an atypical treatment of her, the heroine did not know how to behave. The blonde hinted that they had one personal topic of conversation, hinting that the girl should confirm this fact. Embarrassed by the touch, she agreed with his words. After some time, the heroes stopped when they realized that they had moved to a deserted place. The blonde again noticed the strange expression on the girl's face, but he was not interested in her explanations. Kate's embarrassment today was special because of the prince's appearance. For her, of course, he was always attractive, but in a formal suit, he looked even more beautiful. He didn't want the girl to stare at him like that, so he reminded him of the fulfillment of the terms of the contract. The girl immediately assumed a more thoughtful look. Full of emotion, she told me that the king asked for forgiveness. Surprise froze in Edwin's eyes. It was as if he did not hear the girl's words at all, or did not understand their meaning. His fist struck the column from the side of the emotions that overwhelmed him. The prince could not believe that his father was asking him to forgive him. The young man clearly could not stand the negative emotions that hit him in the head. He began to turn to his father in the hope that he could hear him, remembering the day of his death. Breaking into a shout, Edwin said that he had not lived a normal life since that day. He woke up at night from nightmares and melancholy, and it was the father who, in his opinion, sent his son to this prison of regrets. Kate couldn't understand how the king could be to blame for what was happening. Losing his balance, the prince fell to his knees, asking the Invisible One why he continued to appear before his eyes. He did not understand the point of his father's intervention in this story and preventing his death. Edwin kept screaming about the reasons why his father couldn't just leave him for dead. Exhausted, my lord's last words were that he was forced to die endlessly over and over again.